guys? Welcome back to the DMG Dream Center here in North Carolina, in Clayton. My name is Chris. I also have...
It's Eric.
And Brian's back.
Yeah.
Our special guest, Brian, is back again. He's back to help us out. Another topic that is somewhat relevant to him. Before we get into our topic, I would like to give a little bit of a shout-out to previous listeners. Eric, it's been doing fantastic, man.
It's been doing great. I love it.
Kind of surprised, actually. I'm not surprised in my own strengths, but
absolutely surprised.
It's we want to thank you all for downloading, for listening, and continue to support. We're new at this. We have a great platform. We think we have a good mission, and so far it's taken off better than I thought it would.
Yeah, I mean, for us to put out our first episode, we were at like 50 views last time I saw it.
Yeah.
For a week, and then our most recent's been up for 3-4 days, and it's already surpassed that.
Yeah, I believe not even that long. Since Saturday.
Saturday, yeah. It's huge.
So, it's a pretty big deal for us. Just getting started. We thank you all for your support. Pretty awesome. We're going to have something new coming up soon. We're going to have let us know about what exactly the details are behind the Patreon.
So, for the Patreon, we're still hashing out details, but we're going to set up small subscription bases to help you guys support us in any way you can. I'm thinking right now we'll do $1, $5, and $10 tiers, different content, but we'll have pre- and post-production audio on there that you can listen to. I've been thinking about the idea of doing a video blog on my drive down here every day, just kind of extra content if you guys enjoy us that much that you can get and help support us to help us grow.
Absolutely. And you're going to see some of the behind-the-scenes stuff. So if you guys want to jump on that Patreon, once we get it up and going and we get everything going with it, there's going to be a lot of extra content that's kind of just us, the realism behind us, not just the content you get in the podcast. And I think it'll be a good value for anybody who wants to listen to it. And we'll show some behind the scenes of Brian and truly who he is. He puts on a front on the show.
Well,
so.
You're good at holding my reins, just reeling me back a little bit.
I will warn you, if you don't like profanity or jokes, you might want to...
Yeah, for the Brian tier, you need to be 18 or older. Sign a consent form.
So anyway, today I think we're going to go ahead and open the spotlight, and I couldn't think of a better way for the small business spotlight than to open up for where we're at right now. We're in a small studio, podcast studio from the DMG Dream Center. It's sponsored by Divine Marketing Group in Clayton. The owner is awesome. She put this together. There is multiple offices here with small desks, large desks. There's different types of office space. There's a video recording studio. There's a podcast recording studio.
Cannot wait to use.
I know, it's awesome, isn't it?
Such a lot of stuff in such a small place. I was really impressed with just the span of everything.
Yeah.
Very professional in here.
And as soon as you walk in, you got the couch and like the casual setup, and then you also have the entire table up front. It's really cool setup.
Man, who's that beautiful woman that's out in front as soon as you walk through the door?
That is my wife.
Oh, okay.
Easy.
Okay, never mind. Darn it.
But this studio kind of, I wouldn't say fell in our lap, but the opportunity, it opened as soon as Eric and I talked about getting things off the ground. So it was actually kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, we wanted to throw that out there and give that's the DMG Dream Center. You can find them online. She does different plans as far as renting. You can rent full months. You can rent just one desk. You can do shared space. All the pricing, all the details are online. So if you guys are interested and you're in the North Carolina area, check it out. It's awesome. The owner is a really cool person. She's doing this to help out small business. She's not doing it purely. It's not purely profit driven. She's trying to help people in the community, especially small businesses. So, and us being small business friendly, that's where we wanted to gear a lot of business to. So throw that out there. Also, in case you guys didn't get a chance to listen to the last episode, it was over gun control. The topic was walk up or walk out. I think you guys got a better understanding of who we are and what we want to do with the podcast after that. I also had to make a correction. I said my niece was 12 when we first started talking. I then corrected and said it was 15. That was my error.
How dare you lie on the air?
She's still like a little 12-year-old to me. So when I see her, I don't see a 15-year-old girl about ready to driving and dating.
Oh, I
still see a little girl. So I wanted to correct myself in that last podcast in case you guys caught that and you kind of know where my mind was at. So
I didn't catch it where we were talking. I was probably thinking about the next stupid thing I was going to say. But that was a good catch on your part. I got a little messed up talking because I was still trying to get used to how close to the microphone I could get. I just see in the corner of my eye Chris just pushing me back. Like, get away. But I really enjoyed last week's. Like I said, I've listened to it at least 6 or 7 times. And not just because I like the sound of my own voice, but because that was a subject that was very near and dear to my heart. And I could talk about guns all day long.
I think it was a subject that was, personal to all of us. So I give you guys the opportunity, go check it out, go listen to it, let us know what you think. As always, respond with any kind of mail. We got a few responses we're going to read at the end of this podcast. We'll go over. So that was I know Eric had some personal incidents, and that's why he stood where he stood on gun control. So give it a listen. It's very it's a bit controversial, but I think it'll probe your senses either way you lean. I think it'll make you kind of think about your decision on where you stand. And I think this next one definitely will do the same.
Sure should.
This is going to be an interesting topic. So I'll as usual, let Eric take it away and kind of delve into the topic since this is more his baby. I'm not a huge gamer. I'm into gaming, but I'm not a huge gamer. Eric is the gaming geek of the squad here.
This is all I do. So yeah, this week we're going to be looking at all the attacks on video games this week in terms of, are they calling all this violence that's happening in the world when we all know that it's clearly the gun's fault?
He told us last week he was going to get us back, so we'll let that shot go.
If you listen to that now, you listen to the last podcast. Brian is right. Brian is always right. It was the gun. Thank you, Eric. Thank you for saying that, buddy. But anyway.
Yeah. So this is something that's been around for years now. This was huge back in the early to late 90s. Kind of died down for a little bit, but now with all the recent shootings, it's starting up again. And I've already gotten a reaction out of Brian. What's on your mind, buddy?
No, I messed up. It wasn't a gun's fault. It was a person's fault.
No, you admitted to being at the gun's fault.
Oh, God, I messed that up. We can edit that out, can't we? You're not making me look like a total jerk.
We knew what you meant, Brian.
What I
it's
said.
Right.
No, it was not the gun's fault. It was the person's fault. But video games, in my opinion, are not at fault. Go ahead.
Of course they're not. And this goes back to what we were saying with the gun control, that it's not the gun's fault. It's people in society.
Okay, thank you.
We can
That's
just,
what I wanted to say at the beginning.
We just end the podcast now because Brian and Eric just threw out their opinions. We're done.
We don't have to delve much further into that, but I'm sorry.
We are going down the rabbit hole today.
Again, I was telling both Eric and Chris that the only thing I love more than guns is probably video games. But anyway, I'll shut up right now while Eric gets his.
I feel like that's the third time you said that.
Have you said that on the radio? Okay.
No, you haven't said it on the radio. You said it on the podcast.
I said it on the
radio.
podcast, yeah.
Radio's dead.
Okay. Yeah, it is, isn't
It's
it?
a new wave.
You hear it? Like, it's so crappy now. Anyway.
But yeah, anyways. So yeah, I know, Chris, you're not a big gamer, but you've got that philosophy background, so I know this is going to go into your wheelhouse a little bit as well, just because this isn't an issue about video games. It's an issue about what's behind the video game, the mentality of the people, the houses they're growing up in that's causing these issues. Video games are just being a scapegoat.
Absolutely, yeah. Especially when you start talking about developmental psychology, the video games and the effects on our society, I think, are a bit misconstrued. People have some strong opinions on either side, and again, we're always going to probably come back to this because I think that's a majority of some of our issues is the way these topics are being presented through media. You have one side claiming that it's the sole problem of mass shooters, the sole production of mass shooters is our violent video games, and you have the other side that's too busy blaming one side that they can't actually talk about what some of the studies have said. So there's a lot of scientific evidence and empirical studies behind this, especially a lot of stuff I'm going to throw out today is from the APA, the American Psychological Association. So there's going to be a lot of stuff I'm going to get into. Me personally, I grew up gaming a little bit. I had an Xbox. I go back to the Nintendo 64. The best days of gaming, I think, are behind us. I'm going to be honest with you.
I'm going to disagree wholly.
You disagree? Okay. Well,
you are like it's like so divided
Some
on that.
rose-colored glasses.
It's 2-on-1 right now because as soon as you said that, I'm like shaking my head.
Fair enough. Well, the reason I say that though is I will never forget the times I had with friends playing GoldenEye, 007 GoldenEye on Nintendo 64. We would play all night long and not get any sleep. So it was a blast. Play the Golden Gun where you do throwing knives only, or
right.
So that was my genre of gaming. I grew up with Nintendo 64, Sega Sonic on Sega Genesis. That was an awesome game.
That one still holds up. GoldenEye, not so much.
Well, put it this way:
graphics wise, but gameplay,
it's still
GoldenEye is
still not good.
Oh man, that's our first disagreement.
But you can shoot somebody through a plated steel door with an AK-47. It was awesome. It's like
it's terrible. I loved it for back in the day, but it's terrible now.
The graphics-wise, yes, it has been surpassed, but I think gameplay and just replayability and, like you said, staying up all night and playing that. When I was in the Army, when we had guard duty, we'd be in our day room, and we'd be playing GoldenEye just four people against each other before we had to go back out onto.
I don't know if we're talking about gaming or talking about our age here, because this is getting every game that I loved playing when I grew up is on an emulator that I can now play on my smartphone. So
Yeah, well, that's nice.
That is true. But me being the Generation X guy, like I grew up with just about every single platform there was. My next door neighbors had an Atari 2600. Then I guess it came up to 5200 or whatever. And then the NES, and then Super Nintendo, then Sega, then PlayStation.
I think one of the new gaming trends now is your battle royale.
It's
I'm
gonna
a
be
huge fan of battle royale. I do play Rules of Survival now. I'm a cheapskate. Anybody that knows me personally knows that I'm pretty big tightwad. So if I can play it for free, I'll play it. And Rules of Survival is one that I'm playing now, and it is very realistic. You parachute into the middle of a wasteland, 100 other people, live action players, people that are actually playing at the same time around the world. And you have to find your weapons, you have to find, all your supplies, you pick it up, and then the last person alive essentially wins the game.
It's the winner. Winner, chicken dinner.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a really cool idea. You feel very fulfilled when you win. It's pretty cool winning, even if you come in the top 5.
I wouldn't know.
Well, let's hurry up and wrap up this podcast so I can go home and play it. You've intrigued me.
Well, the reason I want to bring it up too is because you got PUBG, you got Fortnite,
Yep.
And I know there's a lot of these out there, and they're really popular, and it does kind of segue into the violence.
Just
aspect.
a side note, really popular. Fortnite streamer just did a live stream with Drake and has now surpassed the most views and subscribers on Twitch, and is now currently making $500,000 a month by streaming.
It's so crazy.
Wow.
That's how popular this game is right now.
A friend of mine on Messenger, we've been talking back and forth, and she mentioned that to me. He's like, "Do you have that game?" And I had to YouTube it, and now I want it. It looks really good.
It's free.
It's even better.
Fortnite?
Yeah.
I played it once.
I'm
gave
not a
up.
huge fan of
There's
it.
too many people in there that are way too good, and people that I couldn't stand a chance.
That is the downsides of getting late into an online game. So you got those campers, you got those guys who play it nonstop, and
they
they
had
know every little detail about every little map. And
they had some
it's
issues,
frustrating.
and I think it was Fortnite and the one I'm playing, Rules of Survival, and I stopped playing for a while because apparently there were people altering codes, and there was all kinds of stuff they were doing. They were cheating, essentially. They could shoot you behind, obstacles. Now, Fortnite I didn't get too much into because it's very cartoonish.
Yeah.
There wasn't a lot of realism to it. So,
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, people building, walkways into the sky, and shit. I don't know. I don't really.
It's like
it didn't interest me too much. It was
very Minecraft meets Battle Royale meets a Looney Tunes cartoon.
Yeah,
like that.
exactly. But maybe it's a bad thing that our topic today is violence in video games, and here I am talking about playing a video game with violence in it. So
No, but you're proving
Exactly. You're a functioning human being.
Yes, you play violent video games, and yet you are a functioning human being with steady job, wife, house, and all that stuff. You're not going around hurting anybody. So that's why probably me and Eric will agree that games don't cause that. Games don't cause that. Maybe there's something inside the person, and that flips their switch. But for me, I get a lot of aggression out through video games.
Well, I've been waiting. I've been kind of waiting to hear Eric's approach on this. I'm very intrigued. Because I've been kind of on the fence. I've done some of my research just because I'm not as huge of a gamer as you guys are. Pour it out there, man. I want to hear it.
Video games are good. No, I mean,
Absolutely.
I can see video games being the total opposite of what they're under attack for right now. If I go into work, and on most days, it's very true, I will come home very just aggravated, upset. Something happened. It's what it is. There's a lot of aggressive in me. So I point that towards video games to get that aggression out. And we were talking earlier with the sports. I mean, kids watch a violent movie, they play a violent video game, they're going to be a little bit more aggressive in sports and everything.
Yeah, let me reference what Eric's talking about. We were talking about this before the podcast began. There's tons of studies done, psychological studies that were done, and now you could argue this is the time in the generation that they were done. They were done, 10, 20 years ago. And they would show a clip of a violent video with an authoritarian figure wearing a walkie-talkie, and to half the kids, and then the other half of, let me rephrase that, the adolescents. I think the study was between 8 and 12 years old. And then one half viewed the violent video. The other half viewed a benign video. Nothing violent, there was no outcome of the video that they were anticipating. So the hypothesis is the kid would show more aggression in a high-impact sport than kids who didn't watch the video. So they had a bunch of people view the kids as they played field hockey. And the kids and they didn't know. They had no idea what kid viewed what video. And at the time, they actually reported that the kids who did view the video were more aggressive, not only to their opposition, but also to their teammates. Now, the interesting side of that is the study continued where they actually went back like 2 weeks later and they performed the same field hockey game with the same kids, same teams, same authoritarian figures with the referees were all wearing walkie-talkies similar to in the video. And there was not any statistical difference in the two groups. So essentially what they were saying is, it could intrigue more aggression, violent movie could intrigue more aggression in kids in the short term, but nothing over the long term. That was pretty interesting. I found that to be one of the more interesting studies. I've looked up a couple different studies and a couple different things, and I have a lot of statistics that I'll bring up. But I do want to preface something. I want to lay something out there real quick. This is from the APA, the American Psychological Association, and it says, so this is a statistic from them, more than 90% of U.S. children play some kind of video games. Adolescents ages 12 to 17, the figure rises to 97%. So it's safe to say that almost an overwhelming majority, almost every single kid in that age range in America is playing some kind of video game.
Right.
And then also children younger than 8 who play video games spend a daily average, and this is daily average, this is in every single kid, of 69 minutes on handheld console games, 57 minutes on computer games, and 45 minutes on mobile games, including tablets. And that was from 2013. So I can only assume that number has gone up.
I can imagine.
It can only go up.
Right.
Because the technology is becoming more readily available.
Now, considering that 97% of 12 to 17-year-olds playing video games, more than 85% of games on the market contain some sort of violence. Now, it's not all of them shooting, but they contain some sort of violence. Now, that, in my opinion, is a statistic in itself that kind of argues video games are not really causing these violent mass shooters. Now, the reason I say that is because when you look at that number, we'd be turning out tons of mass shooters.
The kids, every kid should be dead by that statistic.
So
I mean,
that's
97%.
Yeah, and that's an interesting statistic. But another thing, quantitative reviews since the APA's 2005 resolution that have focused on the effects, now this is straight from the APA, of violent video game use have found a direct association between violent video games and aggressive outcomes. Now, the reason I bring that statistic up, and I'll let Eric talk more about that as well, they found a direct correlation between violent video games and aggressive behavior. Now, keep in mind, correlation is not causation.
Right.
And one thing that they talk about in the APA directly says this, and this is what really blew my mind. Although the effect sizes reported are all similar, the interpretation of these results the interpretation of these effects have varied dramatically depending on what news organization is covering it. That's kind of bizarre if you ask me. So your effect size on all these studies are saying the same thing, but then you have news organizations saying, oh no, this study says this, no, this study says that, and they're arguing back and forth. So I thought that was pretty interesting, and just that was just the information I found from the APA.
I mean, it's interesting, but it also doesn't surprise me that media is twisting research studies to try to push their agenda a little bit more.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
But going back to it, in all of these studies, reviews, tests, everything, they say it increases the aggressive behavior. All violent acts are aggressive. Not all acts of aggression are violent.
That's very true.
So just because you're an aggressive person doesn't mean you're taking it out by shooting up schools and whatnot. You could be improving your sports game. You could just be focusing on getting better at a game. You're putting that aggression towards something else. It does not have to be violent. And I think that's where a lot of this gets skewed, is they automatically assume that, oh, this kid's aggressive, he's violent, he's attacking other people.
Yeah.
Which is just not the case. I mean, this really started kicking off big time shortly after Columbine with a lovely gentleman by the name of Jack Thompson, who was a lawyer in Florida who blamed the entire shooting on video games and was defending the family trying to sue the studios for the wrongful death at the fault of the video games, which is just asinine. And I know, Brian, you were around back during that time.
Well, back in my day. Yeah, no, it's funny that you brought that up, because that was one thing I was thinking about on the drive here was like some lawyer back in the day made a precedent that started blaming video games, so now everybody's jumping on that bandwagon.
Oh, yeah.
And again, like with the gun control thing, it's just one of those things where people like to pass blame on an object rather than the individual, and it's just lazy to me. It really is lazy. How many of us have played tapping on the table, and Chris is telling me, no. I had, but what I was saying was like, how many people in this world probably listen to this podcast have played violent video games and are not violent people? Yes, we all have a tendency to get a little upset, maybe, because we're used to having that outlet to getting out aggression, but we're not going around just stabbing people, shooting people, running people over with their cars, which I do quite a lot in GTA 5.
If the world was anything like GTA, we'd all
Oh my God!
be dead or in
what
prison,
a crazy world that would be.
Good. Yeah,
what
that
a
would
crazy
be.
world that would be. But that's what I'm saying. People just always tend to want to blame like an object on somebody else doing something wrong. I mean, just terrible.
And that's a contradiction that me as a conservative, or more, like I said, more conservative than not, I find very frustrating, especially when the right brings it up in the news sources. The right likes to point out the fact that, Trump is even lately, he's meeting with all the video game production companies, and Trump wants to talk to them about the violence in video games. He thinks it's a direct correlation to mass shootings. Now, if you know anything about me, I will tell you guys now, I'm not a huge Trump supporter. So I'm going to throw that out there now. He's done some good things, but without getting into politics, I'm not a huge fan of his. So when I lay out politics, I'm not I'm not staying one side or the other. And going back to the contradiction, if we're going to sit here and say you can't blame the gun, you have to blame the person, then why in the hell on the other side would you say you have to blame the video game? So I find that a bit more of a contradiction, especially from the right, when they start claiming that it's all the video game's fault, it's all the media's fault, it's all Hollywood's fault. Well, no, it's still the person's fault,
right?
And it's still there is some kind of issue, they have now. Whether there's any influence on video games on that violent behavior, the statistics don't really point at it. They say that there's now. Here's something I want to point out. Just because the statistics say that there's a correlation between violent video games and aggression does not mean that aggression is a result from the violent video games. What I'm trying to say is the violent video games might draw in more aggressive people, and that's what you're seeing in these studies.
Right.
So I have a hard time really, again, I'm going to come back to saying, and this is something you say when you're in any kind of empirical study, is correlation is not causation. And that's what I think people aren't calling out. People aren't showing. They're just referencing these studies to, again, fit their narrative. And we go over this time and again. We probably will say that a lot in this podcast because that tends to be what we're seeing a lot of. So there's and then the APA even says no single risk factor consistently leads a person to act aggressively or violently. Rather, it is the accumulation of risk factors that tend to lead to aggressive or violent behavior. So that right there pretty much says it all. It says that the research reviewed here demonstrates that violent video game use is just one risk factor. So it's a combination of risk factors. It's not just video games causing these violent outbursts. So, and now there is negatives to video games. We'll get into that a little bit later. There's definitely going to be negatives to video games that, in my opinion.
No, it's definitely there.
And I will agree with Eric and you, Chris, that there are some times when I've seen a video game that makes me go, holy crap. And we talked about that yesterday at work. Do you want to start talking about it now?
Yeah, I don't know what you guys are talking about. So.
Okay, well, we were discussing, we both love video games. That's what, at work, he's my video game, movie guy. We can connect that way. And we were discussing a game. I forget what it was called, but
Modern Warfare 2.
Modern Warfare 2.
Yep.
There is that level. I believe it's the third or fourth level. Gaming nerds, don't get mad at me if I get it wrong. I'm just going off the cuff here.
It's called No Russians.
No Russians. That level, which you have the option to skip.
Yeah, you get a big disclaimer at the very beginning of the game that there's one level that has very graphic and disturbing content. You can skip it if you choose to.
But to describe that scene, anybody who's played that game knows exactly what I'm talking about. It is you start off in the terminal of an airport with a bunch of non-playable characters around, NPCs for you gamers, but people in an airport. And you have a SAW M249, a squad automatic weapon, and you just open fire on these people. It's actually a guy who's going undercover to infiltrate another organization, but he gets caught up in that where they have perform a mass shooting inside an airport terminal, and you're just like I mean, it's got to be like 50, 60 bodies. And
so it's essentially a mass shooting in an airport.
A mass shooting in an airport, and it's one of those things where I love video games, but that
seems a bit tasteless.
That was very tasteless.
I'll disagree a little bit.
But that was very. Aaron's going to talk, so I'm going to let Aaron talk. I talk enough, but
it's a very intense moment in the game, and just seeing that outside of context, it just looks bad.
Right.
But in the narrative of the story, the Russians are trying to go at war with the U.S. and trying to frame U.S. operatives for doing this. So they go into the airport with a bunch of U.S. military equipment, military gear, cover their faces, and go through and just start shooting everybody. That's why it's called No Russians, because the Russians don't want to hit the Russian people in the airport. They're trying to get everybody else, make it look like the U.S. did it.
Okay. So it goes with the storyline.
Yeah, there is motive behind it. It's not like it's just some tasteless level, just go through and shoot.
It's not some extra level that's called mass shooting or something.
It's not for no reason, but if you were somebody to just walk in on somebody playing that and just happen to see that one scene,
well, yeah, if you were a parent,
absolutely.
That is
it's shock factor to the full extent.
Yeah, if you're a parent, you walk into your little 13-year-old Johnny just massacring people in an airport, and you have no idea the context of the game. Even if you do know the context of the game, I guess it'd still be a bit shocking. So,
right.
And the sad part about that was that was a game I happened to play that at the time my roommate had, and he had a 11, 12-year-old boy that was playing that.
Right.
And I'm thinking in the back of my head, you let your son play that game? I know he has an option to skip it, but why would somebody skip that?
Yeah, well, you're talking about hot buttons last time. I think that's a big hot button. Talking about parents letting their children play these games or not. I mean, that's a tricky subject because I grew up playing these games.
Yeah, I did too.
It's individual basis. If it falls on the parent to understand, talk to their kids, let them know, and feel out if they feel like they're ready for something that intense. I mean, I've been playing violent video games since I was little. My dad and I had big talk about it. He was a partial gamer, so I grew up playing the stuff he did. But when I started breaking off on my own, we had talk. These things aren't real. There's actual consequences in the real world. And he thought it was fine for me to play games like that. He knew I understand it. On the other hand, there were some movies, because they can get very gruesome and violent, he wouldn't let me see. So it was up to the parent to take control of what type of media your child's consuming.
And that'd be interesting to see in some of these studies where these children, what kind of home situation they're coming from. You bring up your father, you have good parents. So they set up a structure for you, instructing what happens when these kids come through the system with no good parental supervision, or they come up, and that's where I would like to see what the factors of aggression are. Now, granted, that's one risk factor.
Right.
Violent video games aren't the cause of a mass shooting. They're not creating mass shooters, in my opinion. However, it is an additional risk factor. It could create less empathy. It could create a satisfaction. You get you reach a certain level, or you pass a level for eliminating targets. That almost creates as one study I was reading, it creates almost a positive reinforcement for, inflicting crime or inflicting murder. So I'm not, again, I know this is all controversial. I'm not, again, throwing gaming under the bus, saying it is the cause of mass shootings. It's just that I can see where that's a big risk factor for children or adolescents who don't have a home structure. Yeah. And I think that risk factor would could be potentially detrimental to somebody like that. But again, they're dealing with all kinds of other risk factors.
Half a dozen other things as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, another thing that we really got to talk about, and I'm going to mention this, especially coming from a psychology background, is the development of a child's brain. Developmental psychology was, important to me. And I don't know if you guys know this, but it's something that's maybe thrown out there, maybe it's not. It was kind of controversial, but it's really not anymore, because science has proven that your prefrontal cortex is responsible for most decision making. That's not fully developed until the ages of 21, 22, some kids 25.
Some kids 39.
Well, in Brian's case, no. So, that's something to consider when it comes to the decision making. Now, that's, I think, a double-edged sword, because we can talk about how a kid could see these violent acts and then they don't have the decision-making processes developed in their brain to say that's not appropriate in the real world. But to play devil's advocate, you can also say that this helps kids decision making as far as going through the game, strategizing, learning how to put one foot in front of the other. Because if you're playing these games, for instance, Call of Duty, you're constantly looking out for the other person. You know you're trying to strategize with your team, so you're working with a team to take down the enemy, so to speak. So you're really there's this kind of a double-edged sword there on well, what do these games really teach or not teach, or what are they doing to children? So
I mean, you go both ways. You can, one half says, this is teaching kids how to, instigate these acts of violence, but then you got the other hand saying, well, they're working together. This is showing team skills, and
yeah,
there's no right or wrong because it all comes down to the individual.
Thank you for saying that. And I will say something about that. I think it's a little bit different nowadays because have you seen some of these video games? The graphics on these video games?
Oh, it's incredible.
They're amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it's very hard to distinguish from, real and fake.
Well, even more so to touch on what you're talking about, you're getting into the world of virtual reality now.
Yeah.
They're going to start taking these games to where you feel like you're literally in the game.
Yeah.
So, I mean, police departments and military are already using virtual reality for training and, assault training and stuff like that. So that begs the question, how real are these going to actually get?
Yeah, if you have stock in VR, go ahead and keep that stock for a little while longer.
Not right now.
Eric was about to say something. I'm sorry, Eric.
Brian, you may know this. I think Chris may not. It's kind of a smaller movie. You know the movie Gamer?
Yeah.
Have you ever seen it?
I don't think I've seen it, but I know of it.
The big tech company puts these chips in a bunch of prisoners, and they're all death row inmates. With these chips, they're controlled by another person known as the player.
Oh yeah, I have seen that movie.
It's a great movie. No, it's a terrible movie, but it's a great movie.
It is a terrible. It is a terrible movie, but I like the implications
Right.
it brought up. Well, not implications brought up, but I like the tone. I like the theme of the movie. I like where the director was going with it. The writer was going with it. Didn't really care for the movie. It was kind of stupid.
It wasn't good, but I love it.
I got the point.
But anyways, you have the player who controls this inmate. If the inmate wins, 20 or I think it's 10 matches, then they get set free. And instead of going on death row, they have this option. Chances of them surviving all that super low, so that's why they do it. But anyway, it's essentially a VR. The player is pretty much inside the body of this convict playing the game.
Oh, wow.
But after so many, they have this effect, what they call the bleeding effect, where he steps out of the VR, the player's doing his normal thing, but he's getting this constant effect that he's still kind of in a VR world.
Right.
Obviously, it's very over the top in the movie, but that is something that's a possibility.
That's something to think about, yeah.
Not being able to disconnect your mind from that VR environment.
So do you think the potential risk factors could get greater, especially on children? I mean, because when we start talking about the cognitive processes and we start talking about decision making and the prefrontal cortex not being developed, that decision making, is it harder to separate reality when you're in virtual reality from the actual reality in real world? As virtual reality takes off. I mean, can you imagine playing Call of Duty in virtual reality where you have I've seen prototypes where they have a pad you can actually run on.
Oh, yeah, you got the pad, you got the gun.
Yeah, you got the gun. You got all the motions. The only thing you don't have is obviously the pain of getting shot and physically dying. So
physically dying, no, but they're working on stuff where you get haptic feedback. There's spots that will inflict pain on you where you're getting hit. So it's getting to that point.
So do you think is somebody who doesn't believe violence is affected by violent video games affect aggression? Do you think that would be different?
I don't think it'll be very different. I think obviously you're going to get different cases. There will be certain individuals it affects a lot more just because that's the way their brain's developing. I got to imagine it's going to have some more severe effect than just staring at a TV, playing a game with a controller in your hand, because it's going to be a little bit harder to kind of disconnect. But I don't really see it be a bigger issue. I just see it as technology advances, it could become a serious issue depending on how realistic, lightweight, everything.
Well, we should be honest in the conversation. Virtual reality and AI in general, I mean, that's going to change everything we know about technology. So this is one small little drop in the bucket when we're talking about changing reality when it comes to technology in general.
Will we be worried about that stuff in the future if we're all just in our house, just VRing it all day long? Like, we don't have to worry about going outside to the real world. We just stay inside. Oh, going to the grocery store. Ooh, hey, sweetie. Picking up the ladies at the virtual bar.
Well, I think what you're talking about is like a surrogate.
That's Second Life.
Second life.
Yeah.
That's your second life. Well, so I just want to reiterate too. I'm going to read something here that's from it's from the National Center of Biotechnology Information. So this is
I love how prepared he comes.
the adolescent maturity of the brain. The adolescent maturity of the brain, the promise of and pitfalls of neuroscience research in adolescent health and policy. So this pertains to the study of neuroscience in adolescence and policy, which is, that's right down my alley. But anyway, prefrontal cortex coordinates higher order cognitive processes and executive functioning. Executive functions are a set of supervisory cognitive skills needed for goal-directed behavior, included planning, response inhibition, working memory, and attention. So basically, everything that you need for proper decision making, is developed in the prefrontal cortex. And I wanted to preface that. I just wanted to show you guys that and kind of lay that out there so you understand how important it is. But I also think that kind of puts us into two things I'm going to go over here. The drawbacks of gaming. I think we kind of know the drawbacks. Gaming potentially, there's studies that have linked video games to depression, addiction, and decreased empathy. We talked about decreased empathy earlier, but they're starting to see behavior patterns of addiction in
gaming. Addiction's a real thing?
It's a very real thing. I watched a YouTube video of a guy who played, what was it? I can't remember. Maybe it was World of Warcraft. I know that's a big one.
In there.
Yeah. He played World of Warcraft for like 24 hours straight, and he could do it. He'd go sleep for 12 hours, and then he quit his job. Like his wife divorced him. Like it was a whole big issue.
I mean,
No, I'm sorry, Gary.
You and I are just on the same.
We're probably going to step over each other and say the same thing because we're both the same. I think have the same views on that. I have seen documentaries of what you were talking about, Chris, about people who just that is their life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
they'll quit their job. Some people may even make money on these MMOs, and they can make digital money that they use to sell to other people for real money.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is a livelihood. There was also some weird guy who played Legend of Zelda for like 25 hours straight.
Wonder who that could have been. All that went to charity, though. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, it was for charity, man. It was for charity.
That's a good thing. I remember that. I remember your link up. And I think that's a bit different. I'm not talking about...
Right. That's doing it once a year for a charity with a bunch of other people is one thing. I mean, it's a big issue in South Korea right now. They got these places, they're called PC bangs. It's just a bunch of PCs. People can go play games all day. There have been multiple deaths of people who just stay there for 48 and 72 hours straight, just playing this one game, not taking care of themselves, not eating, not doing anything, and they're just dying because they can't stop.
From starvation or...
yeah, half a dozen other things. Not moving, you get a blood clot in the leg, right to the brain, you're done.
Jeez.
It happens a lot, and it's just...
There's a game I used to play on my PC called Stronghold. I don't know if you ever saw that, but it was like basically a medieval build castle game.
Oh, yeah.
And if you play it for like a certain number of hours straight, there's a voice on the computer say, "Wouldn't you like a snack, dear sir? Wouldn't you like to take a break? How about some water?" And it's like, well, wow, yeah, you got to feed that constant reminder to people. Otherwise, you're just going to sit there and just dead.
That's what the Wii did. When the Wii first came out and I got Zelda for it, I mean, I put in 14, 15 hours on that first day, but every time you pause it, why not take a break? Why not get up and stretch your legs?
I've done that too. I've done that too in new video games. I remember coming home, and I'll be honest with you, one of the best things going to Blockbuster. Obviously, this is going to be, if you're younger listening to this,
he dropped the Blockbuster.
I dropped the Blockbuster, but going to
Blockbuster is a Blockbuster.
Yeah, a lot of kids back in the day, there was this place where you had to go and physically pick out the movie or game you wanted to play. You couldn't just push a button.
It was a physical version of Netflix.
You actually had to go out and talk to somebody.
Yeah. So on the weekends, my parents, we didn't have a whole lot of money, so what we did we'd watch movies and we'd entertain ourselves on the weekend. We'd take a trip to Walmart for groceries. Well, next to Walmart was Blockbuster. So when my parents had a little extra money, we'd go into Blockbuster. And walking into Blockbuster was like just
so much stuff.
All the gold shininess and all. They had all the candy. They did it right. I don't know. They went out of business because of technological changes, but
they didn't ship
for their time.
They didn't have to. They had a chance to buy out Netflix, and they turned it down.
They had a chance to turn their model into something like Netflix. I think they tried to do like a Redbox style.
They did. Yeah.
Way too late. Way behind on that one. Anyway,
interestingly enough, though, getting that movie, I would almost. I'd almost bypass the movie just to play that game. I would be up all night.
Oh, yeah.
My dad and my dad's best friend were guilty of it. And if you guys listen to this, Doug, I kicked your ass at Blades of Steel all the time with the wraparound. But yeah, we'd play Blades of Steel during Christmas vacation, and I'd be off for a week. And I would be 6, 7, 8 years old. And we'd play Blades of Steel on regular NES, and I'd smoke them constantly.
Oh, yeah.
And how good that felt all the time. But anyway, I know we're getting a little off topic.
That was
but-
me and my dad. NBA Jam. We'd rent it every weekend. I don't know why the hell we never bought it.
NBA Jam, NBA 2K, what was it? NBA 1995 was like that game at Blockbuster. Like it was never there.
It was never there.
It was
yeah,
never
yeah,
there.
Yeah.
There was always that one game that you wanted to rent that was never there.
Right.
So God bless Steam, whatever it's called. God bless Redbox.
But the gamer cult is just gonna come after you, man. You're gonna get all kinds of hate mail from the gamer.
I get that. I welcome all. I welcome all mail, whether it be love mail or hate mail. I bring it on. What was that? Oh shit! I had something in my head.
Totally off track now.
Yeah.
So we talked about, what led us into that topic was all the, the time spent on game playing, and obviously we know the drawbacks from spending that much time on gameplay. But that leads me into another article. And so I wanted to cover the positive effects of gaming on cognitive ability, because there was a University of Oxford study by experimental psychologist Andrew. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce his last name. It's got a P or an R and a Z, and I'm not that good at that name. So anyway, this was in 2014, and it was in the Journal of Pediatrics. And it said, and this is a quote from the study, found that less than an hour of gaming a day was associated with pro-social behavior and higher life satisfaction to kids who didn't play. However, the opposite was true for kids who played more than 3 hours a day. So that right there is exactly what we talked about. Kids playing an hour a day showed increased social skills. They showed increased cognitive ability.
So that's why I'm the way I am.
So anything after 3 hours, though, they showed the opposite. They showed decreased social skills, decreased cognitive ability. So that right there, I think that's one of the things I found most interesting about this topic when I was searching for statistics and certain studies. And that's something I don't hear anybody talking about. They don't talk about how it can be a good thing if it's balanced out. As long as you're not spending, again, 12, 13, 14 hours, you have another life, you have, responsibilities, you have kids, you have a spouse or a significant other, whatever it may be. If you have these other responsibilities, obviously 24 hours straight of gameplay, unless it's like a charity or something like that, if that's a normal behavior, that's not healthy for anyone. No. So, I can't say that leads to violence, but that definitely leads to other issues.
Yeah, I will agree with that depression. How many, Eric, how many hours of Fallout have you put in? Like, between the two of us, it's probably a lifetime's worth.
Let's see, Fallout 3 was about 100.
Yeah.
New Vegas was about 100. Or I think I put 130 because I wanted all the achievements.
Yeah.
That's just 3 games.
Yeah, when Fallout 3 came out, that was a game changer for me in my social life. I remember going home for Christmas break when I was in college, and I rented that from a Hollywood video of all places.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, you forgot that.
I forgot about
the bastard child of Blockbuster. But I was supposed to drive to Charlotte and meet up with a girl I was seeing at the time to go to a New Year's Eve dance or get together with her, and instead I ended up playing Fallout 3 for about 3 or 4 days straight, and I totally ditched her. I'm not proud of that. I'm not advocating that whatsoever.
Brian, this is not taxi cab confessions.
No. But I'm just saying how that I am going after that what you were talking about, how
Absolutely.
you can get sucked into that. It can destroy your social life. I didn't become a violent person, but I definitely didn't give a crap about anything except that game for those 4 days.
Yeah, it's definitely relevant. I'm just giving you trouble. It's definitely relevant.
Yeah.
And it talks about how any of us are susceptible to the addiction of gaming. I mean, I don't think it's just necessarily an addictive personality that will get addicted to gaming, but it's just as easy to get addicted to food or get addicted to drugs or anything that gives you that personal satisfaction that you continue to crave. And if you continue to get that personal satisfaction, you're going to keep playing the game.
Absolutely.
I will say before I didn't want to leave on a bad note for anybody listening. She's happily married right now. She probably has a kid. I don't know.
The best thing that ever happened to her.
I was the worst and best thing that ever happened to her, because as soon as we ended things, she met her future husband.
Yeah,
so
her kid's avatar is Brian, and he takes it through the violent video games all the time, and it just melee.
No, she's doing well. She's doing good. Anyway, but but I did go down a dark road. Being obsessed with that game. I mean, Fallout 3 there was just something about that game that I couldn't put it down.
It was almost as good as Oblivion.
I've never played either one.
I believe. Well, now we're getting off the topic of
Post show.
What video games do to what, like, now we're going to start rating video games. Oblivion was not that good. I mean, I hated, like, every time I swung my sword, I had to repair it. Whereas with the new Skyrim, it's kind of streamlined everything, and I feel like Skyrim. Okay.
Post show. We'll get you.
See, it went off the rails. But
Ryan, what did we say last time about you're not coming here? No. And something I think we need to address. We're talking solely video games, PC, Xbox, all these systems. We also, it's a big issue with the way it's platformed now. Now you can get on your cell phone and play a game. I'm very guilty of this. I'm a huge fan of Clash Royale. Like, I'm a huge Clash Royale guy.
Oh, you're that guy. Okay.
Well, hey, I'm going to be completely honest with you. It's a little bit of pastime. You catch yourself with a little bit of downtime. I'm guilty. I'm that guy. I know you guys are listening. Don't laugh when I say this. You're on the toilet, nothing to do. You open Clash Royale. So there's always those games, and it's very addictive. So especially when you figure out something that somebody else hasn't, or you find a deck that works better. So, but that leads us into another part of gaming and how it's being connected constantly.
Oh, yeah.
We talked about being connected like on social media and how it's driving depression and a lot of other factors because you're kind of closed off. That kind of gaming, I think too much of it is very unhealthy because there's no social interaction with anybody else. There's really not what exactly other than strategy, dropping your skeleton tier or dropping, what exactly are you learning from those games?
Right.
Especially coming from a fully developed 31-year-old, soon to be 32-year-old, there's not much I'm learning from that I didn't already know. So, right, these games are flooded in the app markets. Like
you can't go 2 steps without running into one.
Oh yeah, and advertisements. They're now advertising during the Super Bowl.
Yeah,
unbelievable. These how much expensive are these ads? And now these games are and you get a 12-year-old sitting on the floor. Oh, Mom, look at that game. I want that one.
I think their formula now is just put a hot blonde in a white dress and just sell that game. I mean, I haven't played those games, but I love those commercials.
Yeah, I mean, how much money are these guys getting when they can do Super Bowl ads with Kate Upton?
Right.
It's a mobile game that's free to play. Where are you getting all this money from?
the in-app purchases are insane.
That's another issue of
buy 300 crystals for $20, and then you're spending real money on on code, on fake.
Which, to be fair, I will straight up, I have done it. I have bought in-game stuff constantly. But the bigger issue at hand is that's part of that addiction for gaming.
Yes.
It also becomes into some of these games like Call of Duty, Rainbow Six Siege, which isn't as bad. That's a perfect game. But they're out there where you get these, I'm blanking on the word. You get these packs. You pay money, you get a pack, it's got a random item in it. That's damn near gambling. That's going to pull in anybody with an addictive personality. They're just going to keep dropping money on this, hoping to get what they want. And that, I think, is a huge issue right now.
And then every other day they throw out these specials. Oh, we'll give you this for half price. Oh, well, at half price. Well, then
it'd be stupid not to.
Why wouldn't I do this?
Well, do you think these companies are creating this environment, or are they just
absolutely not?
They're capitalizing on
free market,
what people want.
Yeah, I mean, if there's a desire for it, it's going to exist. It doesn't matter what legislation, what law you put in. It's exactly like we have a drug problem. You have a drug problem when there's a demand, there'll always be a supply. And it doesn't matter if it's illegal or legal. Look at prohibition. Look at anywhere in the world, it happens that way. Now that's whole nother podcast. But getting back to the gaming, I think the addiction. I personally think the addiction aspect and the depression aspect is way more detrimental to our society than anybody that believes aggression comes out of gaming. I mean, that's just my personal opinion.
No, I agree. This goes back to what we were talking about last week with the mental health issues. That being the biggest problem right now. Yeah,
so maybe these people that seeing more aggression coming from violent video games are actually witnessing a change, a systemic change within our society and our children and the way they're being developed, and they're attributing it to violent video games. Yep. It's easy to look at something and go, oh, well, it's because of that, or it's because of that. It's easy to point one factor, but we talked about this in the gun control episode, the walk up or walk out episode. You can't pinpoint it.
Yeah.
So, well, if I can't pinpoint it, I'm going to point at that issue, and I'm probably going to blame something that my side agrees with. And you see it all over the news. I'm not going to go through them all, but like even the New York Post, CNN, Fox, I have them all. I went through all their links, and CNN's talking about how Trump is a horrible person because he's blaming video games. And you go to Fox, and Fox is talking about video games being the blame for all this, but nobody's talking about what we just brought up, like 1 hour of gaming can show improvement or more than that. So it's again, it's going both sides. Oh, I'm right, you're wrong. They're all pointing the fingers. Nobody wants to talk about the true problem. Maybe video gaming is not the problem, but maybe too much is, resulting in other issues.
Yeah,
so
I mean, that's true for anything. You indulge in something too much, it's going to have negative effect at some point.
that's
Absolutely.
that's anything in life.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, there's nothing. Food, even something that keeps you alive. Water, you drink too much water, you can drown.
Serious
so
issues, yeah.
That's anything in life, and I personally, I was on the edge when we first started talking about this topic. I'm like, well, yeah, there's got to be some kind of correlation with. I was that person. There's got to be some kind of correlation with aggression in video games. When I can walk around in a game and shoot people all day long, why wouldn't that bleed out into reality? But from the statistics, it just doesn't support it. So, do you guys want to say, Brian?
Well, I know, like. I hate when you said that about, well, I don't go out and shoot people. Yes, you don't, because you're a good person. You're a good person. I'll turn on GTA 5 and just go run over random bums on the streets of San Andreas, or like pull over and like do a drive-by to somebody. Doesn't mean I'm getting into my truck, taking my shotgun and my pistol and going out and killing people. It is a personal problem. And if I'm not mistaken, there are ratings on games now. I mean, the left.
Oh, are there?
The left.
We'll come back to that in a second.
The left introduced that. Didn't Tipper Gore? Wasn't she the one who brought that
sure.
to light about having rating systems on games? And I mean,
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There are rating systems on games. There's rating systems on movies, and
Can I interject?
Yes, please,
real quick, guys?
please.
Just because it's one of my favorites out there.
Okay.
This quote from Mr. Trump the other day. It says, we have to look at the internet because a lot of bad things are happening to young kids and young minds, and their minds are being formed. And we have to do something about maybe what they're seeing and how they're seeing it, and also video games. I'm hearing more and more people say the level of violence in video games is really shaping young people's thoughts. And you have to go a step further, and that's the movies. You see these movies, they're so violent, and yet a kid is able to see a movie if sex isn't involved, but killing is involved. Maybe they should have to put a rating system in for that.
They already have. I mean,
Rating systems for
Oh, my
both
God.
forms of media, and this is the man making decisions on whether violence is...
let's not get on that.
Let's be honest.
Let's not get on that anti-Trump stuff.
The executive office does not make the decisions.
No, I know they don't make the decisions, but they're the ones putting that front
You're
face
right.
out there.
They sign law.
it's-
Let's just be honest. Trump needs to ditch the Twitter
God, yes.
altogether. Like,
Well, he has a right to, but it's like
No, he doesn't.
you're
He
the
broke Twitter's TOS.
Well, that's true. He has a right to, just like anybody. If you start saying, "Well, you can't," but dude, you are the president of the United States. Put your phone down, and
yeah, exactly. And I think anybody,
I don't
even
wanna
if
start Trump
you're
bashing. But-
No, I don't. I'm not either. Like, I'm gonna say, hey, I voted for Trump. Okay, everybody can hate me, send me hate mail, whatever.
You're
I
what's
voted
wrong
for
with this
Trump,
country.
but guess what? You had me decide between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump.
Okay, let's
Anyway,
get away from that.
Anyway,
That's,
but no, what I was talking about the rating system when you interjected. There's a rating system, 17 and older for mature. If you're a parent and you see your son or daughter with a game that says mature, why don't you pop that game in, take a look at it.
I'll bring up
be a
something
parent.
that for a lot of the issues we're going to talk about would eliminate a majority of the issues, inside these topics. Personal responsibility.
Yep.
And that's why I'm more of a libertarian, because I believe in personal responsibility across the board. You put personal responsibility in the hands of parents. If little Johnny is 12 years old and he's playing a violent video game and you don't want him to, who's his parents?
Yeah.
And that's where it really boils down to. Trump's tweet, absolutely ridiculous, as most of them are. I'm going to be honest with you. Like I said, even though me being conservative, I can still be critical of the president. If you can't be critical of anybody in office, even though you may align further with their party, then you're just being naive.
And you're missing the complete point.
Yeah.
I will say that one more thing, but well, I'm going to say probably a couple more things. But yes, Trump does that. I mean, he'll say something really good. He'll go on camera. He'll say something really good. It's like, yes, you're doing it. And then you check your Twitter feed. Oh, oh, he said that. Oh.
Yeah, that's very true. And getting back to the video game aspect, I find it hard. I don't know. It's hard to regulate that with. I mean, I know parents. It's parents' responsibility to regulate that. They have rating systems for a reason. I keep coming back to maybe the kids who don't have that parental system at home. And that's what I'm really troubled by.
Right, and that's a whole other issue.
Yeah, like you said, that comes back to the mental health and kids getting the mental health they really need. And that's where, that's a lot of the issues, I think, in our society. I mean, you look at some of the kids now, the divorce rate now. I hate to throw out a conservative hot button and hot topic, but it's a big deal. I think kids without raised in a traditional home, or at least with two parents, or because when your parents make decisions, they're going back and forth. They talk to one another to find the best solution for the child. So, like you were raised with two good parents, sound minds. I'm not sure your family situation.
My parents were fantastic.
My parents were young when they had me, but my parents did a great job raising me. Now, they had their own issues. You get to an age where you realize they're just human too.
Right.
But my parents, I think, did a fantastic job raising me. I'm a pretty awesome person, So. But anyway, no.
We'll get back to
that. I'm not gonna argue against that.
But yeah, I mean, it begs the question: what do we do with these children who are in a system, or does it affect them more? And that's something that we don't really have any answers for. But I would like to see some studies done on these kids who don't have that parental system, as far as does video games or any violent behavior, media, anything. We can't pinpoint video games here. We got to look at all media. We got to look at Hollywood. I mean, you got these Hollywood actors coming out again, all on board with gun control, but their next hit that they're making millions of dollars off, they're shooting 20 people.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's a bit intriguing to see how that affects, and again, I'm going to jump back into the VR. I'm really curious to see how that affects, going forward. So
a lot of kids get pushed, swept under the rug. And we just got to keep an eye on them. I just hate that lazy argument that it wasn't his fault. He was playing video games. You're making excuses for this person. We got to keep our eye on these kids. I don't care if you come from a broken home or a traditional home, but we got to pay attention. I know there's a lot more people in this world now, but we got to pay attention to people. We got to share this planet. Keep your eye on them.
You're a big proponent of saying we got to share this planet, aren't you?
I really am. We have this short time to be on this planet, and I think the people who do all these bad things, they don't care. They don't think like that, and we do have to watch them.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think a good solution for talking about, no matter what side you are on the video game argument, a good solution is to educate yourself a little bit more on the development of your children.
Yeah.
Know what level they're at. Not all kids are going to develop at the same rate. So, just like not all kids go through puberty at the same time, learn exactly where their psychological development is and understand how that game may or may not affect them. And like you said, your dad sat you down and said, this isn't reality.
Yeah.
Have that hard conversation with your kid and let them know the difference between reality if you're going to allow them to participate and, play those games. And I will tell you, Mom, I love you, but I remember you and I couldn't play Magic the Gathering. Guess what I was doing? I was playing it when she wasn't looking.
There you go.
So, she didn't want me watching South Park. Guess what I was watching late night when when they were
11 o'clock,
awake.
Turn down the volume.
Yeah, well, you want to talk about a punishment, you're talking about being punished. That was the one thing my parents did. If I got bad grades or I acted bad in school, they took away the video game.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God, that's the worst thing in the world. It's like, I could go outside and play, and that's fine, but I want to play video games.
Right.
And that was their main motivator to get me to straighten up and fly right, was take away the video games. And I remember I would bawl when they took away my video games. I still do. I just think I thought that was the worst punishment, and that is the number one punishment. If they're so into games, take that away from them, and then they will learn. I got to act right to have this right to play my games.
Yeah, and I think another solution could definitely be pressure. Like people like us, like the alternative millennial, getting together, talking about the problems, influencing our leaders, influencing people above us, people we vote for, to rely more on personal responsibility. People like you said, Trump's tweet. I think it's so off base, and I think it's so based off of emotion. And a lot of people base their opinions and they base their everything off emotion. Yeah. Nothing's based out of statistics. That's why I don't want to come in here. Like I came in here first, like I told you. I was thinking, there's got to be a correlation with aggression in children in video games. I started delving into the research. I'm like, wow, okay. I kind of got smacked in the face. Yeah. I'm like, man, Eric might have a point on this. As far as it's not a direct. There's a correlation, but it's not a direct causation. So it really kind of blew me away. And I think we need to pressure people around us, our peers, our parents, everybody around us, to actually learn more about the topic and understand that it's not necessarily the case. But I mean, I'm not sure of any other solutions we have rating systems. Yeah. That's, I don't understand.
Rating systems, it fully throws every little thing in there, why it has the rating it does.
Yeah.
You have full control. Whether you've played a video game or not, you can look at that and get a basic idea of what it is to know if it's right or not for them.
Right. Yeah, and I think a lot of things come down to personal responsibility. The mass shootings, all this stuff comes down to personal responsibility. If you start, you can solve almost every political hot button topic, abortion, all this stuff with personal responsibility, almost everything.
Yeah.
So, again, my opinion. I'm reverting back to my libertarian mind, but that's how way I've always felt about it. But anything else on video games you didn't cover, Eric? I know this was your baby, so.
I think we covered it pretty well. I mean, I think we can branch off into other subjects for other podcasts because there's still
We can just keep
plenty
going.
of stuff I want to talk about.
Right.
But in terms of violence, I think we covered it pretty well. It comes down to personal responsibility and, like most things, common sense.
Yeah,
Giving
absolutely.
a shit, giving a crap, caring about.
I said it, I
people.
like
yeah,
it.
I get it myself. I'm totally in agreement with both of you. I mean, this is not a very controversial podcast because I think I agree with everything both of you have said. I'm just one of those people. I just hate when people blame the inanimate objects and they shift blame to say something else caused that. I was like, well, I played plenty of violent video games. I was in my formative years when Mortal Kombat first came out, and you could rip somebody's head off.
Get
and
over
see,
here.
Yeah. I remember being Sub-Zero. Who was it? Sub-Zero?
Scorpion.
Well, that's Scorpion, what you just did. Scorpion,
Yeah.
When you could just take your mask off and breathe fire on somebody like a dragon and burn them up. But Sub-Zero had this move to where he would just uppercut somebody, take their head off, and their spine would just be sitting there
Yep.
dangling. And he's sitting there holding it like
Finish him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like Predator 2, just like
Yeah.
"Rrr." And I waited. I couldn't wait. That game came out on my birthday when I was 13 years old, and that was the first thing I did when I got home was go get that game and play it. Binge played it all day long, and it was probably one of the first very violent video games that was readily available for children. In my 13, I played it all the time. I'm not a violent person. I don't wish harm to others. So I hate when people try to shift it around and say even the violence in the video games did it. So whatever. Okay, I'm wrapping up. I get so mad.
Brian gets very passionate, which is one of the reasons we like to have him on. We want people
We
that
like to have them on?
do we? I don't know. We got to talk about this next time.
I am in the room, you guys. I'm right
Oh yeah,
here.
yeah, that's right. We'll text about it later. No,
I think you just sent him a text right now. I was like, we got to get this guy out of here. Oh my god. I'm sorry.
yeah. So I mean, wrapping up and kind of talking about this, I think there's some key points. We need to focus more on positivity. There's some positive aspects to video games. And parents, you have a right to choose the positive video games for your kids.
Yeah.
Cognitive development helps with social skills. Depending on what platform you're playing on, I've heard some Call of Duty trolls that I would never want my kids to be a part of that conversation. However, that comes to regulating and balancing as far as parents. And aside from that, I think I've come to the conclusion I don't believe violence really is systemic from video games. I think it's a risk factor, as everything else is a risk factor for violence. But there's no way that I think mass shootings are solely to blame. Or, video games are solely to blame for your new development mass shootings. It comes back to exactly what our result was from our last podcast. It comes down to the problem in society.
Exactly.
So, anything you want to add to that, man?
You want to end on a lighter note, Mr. Eric? Talk about our favorite video games?
Oh, that'll be post-show.
Okay.
Stay tuned.
Yeah. Stay tuned for
No,
the
but,
show.
I mean, we do have the mailbox. We got a couple letters.
Yeah, let's get started with those.
You want to read yours first?
I don't have it up yet, so go
Okay,
ahead.
I guess I'll read mine first then. All right, so this says, "Hey Amp, I am writing to say that I'm loving your podcast. I can't wait to hear what other topics you guys come up with to talk about. I do have a suggestion though. I would like to hear more of Eric's perspective on your topics. I think he has more to say about things and I would like to hear them. Great work and thank you for creating a conversation platform." So yeah, I'm a little quiet sometimes. These guys are big voices and I'm a little voice at times, but I think today I got my voice out a little
absolutely.
bit more.
And I think it all comes down to how we work too.
Yes.
We're a bit different in how I like to read a lot of statistics. I like to throw a lot out, and that does take up some time. But that's not necessarily just all my opinion. That's kind of building the platform for what we're talking about.
Right,
So
you give a base, we talk about it. It works
yeah,
well.
I do like what you do because if not, it would just be us just rambling for like 3 hours. I mean,
Yeah.
So you do keep us on. You add a spine to this and you keep us on track.
I'm a stats person. I gotta have stuff
I
based
never
in
knew that.
statistics. I gotta have stuff based in statistics, or else I feel like it's all opinion, and that's what all everybody does is throw around opinion. When you have a platform to talk about and you know what you're talking about, I think that's much better. But so the next one we got was interesting topic. Gents, please address how playing violent video games such as Call of Duty is any different from the violence in Hollywood media. So I think we kind of addressed that, actually.
Yeah.
Essentially, I don't think there is much difference. Your Hollywood media portrays violence. Well, the only difference I could see is I don't see the developers of games up on stage declaring anti-gun zones and you know, I don't see as much of a hypocritical platform as you would some of the Hollywood stars. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I'm not saying either way is right or wrong. You don't see me. You know, I'm an advocate for the Second Amendment, but you don't see me arguing in reverse, depending on what's making me money. Now, I'm not coming on the podcast arguing for gun control because it's going to earn me money. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I find there maybe in that aspect there's some difference, but as far as the content itself,
Right.
I mean, one's interactive, one's not. They're portraying the same thing, and actually, you could actually argue that there's more realism in Hollywood movies.
Oh, very much so.
So,
And it comes down to a lot to the creative side of things too. Usually, the big Hollywood guys who are speaking out against something have no control over the movie that they're being cast in. I mean, I'm not.
That's very true. That's
I'm not
very
saying
true.
you should, you know, if it's something you're against, you probably shouldn't do the movie in the first place. But I understand there's way more to it than just that.
Yeah, you bring up
on
a
the
good point.
Creative side of things, they can. I mean, they have a message. They can create the game into that same message, or keep that stuff out of there. They have a little bit more control.
Well, they're signing a contract for a job, so
Right,
you're absolutely right.
yeah.
They may not have exactly the, you know, and they're working.
Yeah.
So I get it. I get where you're coming from. with that.
It's a job.
Right.
It's a job for them. Yeah, I will agree with you, Chris. I think the video games are a lot more interactive, and that's probably why they're scrutinized more than actual like Hollywood movies, because you're controlling that character.
Yeah,
A
yeah.
movie, you're being very passive.
Right,
But in a
right.
video game, you're directly controlling what the character does or does not do.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I can see
And,
that.
but I'll add to that about Eric can attest to this. There are a lot of games out there. The disclosure at the beginning is like, this game was designed by multicultural people
Yep.
from various
Sure,
faiths and backgrounds, and
That's cool to see. Yeah.
And it's like, this is a collaboration of
Different minds.
different
Yeah,
minds,
yeah.
and that's how we should all be. And some of the best games I've ever played.
Right.
A lot of the Assassin's Creed games.
It's a Ubisoft thing right
Yeah.
there.
Actually, that
Ubisoft.
was one I did play. That was one of my favorites. I still have that at home.
Assassin's Creed?
Yeah,
That's a great.
Love Assassin's Creed. Well, thank you guys for your input and the mail. We appreciate that. Send us something over a little bit more controversial next time. I want to.
You guys suck.
I want to hear some emails with. We gotta get some Brian hate mail in here or something. No,
Please, please, and I will not be offended. Let it out. Let it out. Let it out.
So to close, you guys can reach us. Our email is ampodcast1. That's amp. I'm sorry, AM podcast. I always mess that up. ampodcast1 at gmail.com. Twitter, we're at ampodcast18. Whoever has ampodcast1, you suck.
You need to give it up.
We need that. Anyway, Instagram, it's also at ampodcast1. And then you can also follow the hashtag AMP or hashtag AMP. All of our posts are now going to have the hashtag AMP. So Instagram has a new feature where you can follow that hashtag. SoundCloud, we're the Alternative Millennial Podcast. And Google Play Music, we're the Alternative Millennial Podcast. Apple, you suck because you still have not published our podcast. But that is coming soon. We're still waiting to hear back from them. I'm not sure what's...
I'm going to send an email.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's taking them so long. But we will be on iTunes soon. You guys can download on iTunes. Unless they just heard my podcast, and they probably won't publish us. But
And I don't want to be on your platform anyways.
yes, they do. Just playing hard to get.
So we appreciate everybody listening. Again, next week we're going to have a very interesting topic. It's going to be a little bit lighter of a subject, but you guys will have to tune in to our social media to see what that topic's going to be. You guys want to close anything else, or are we out of here?
I would just say, if you want to play a nice little drinking game, listen to the Gun Control podcast and take a shot every time Brian says the word like.
Or you can listen to episode 1 and how many times I say absolutely.
Absolutely.
All right, guys. Well, we absolutely love all you guys. Thanks for listening again, and we will catch you later.
Yes, sir.
Thank you guys so much.